All right, troopers, we are now approaching the final phase of our ligature project, phase 4. And at this point in the game, you have taken the input from the previous video and you will have incorporated those changes into your final design. And ideally, you will have made a large version of your ligature. And the reason it's best to draw a large version is because you can work out little teeny details like this thickness right in here is probably not quite right, probably ought to be a little thinner in there. You know, these are the kinds of things that it's best to work out first. If you're working in the really small designs and you are going to bring this into Illustrator, you're gonna struggle a little bit because they're just little designs, and so there's a lot of things that you could miss. Like, say for example, if we were to take this design and put that into Illustrator, that would be problematic. Let's see if there's anything else in here. No, those are the ones. Okay. So this is the last version of the project at the review. Clearly there's issues, right? There's, the baseline issue is still screwed up. The bridge between the arm and the loop of the A are still struggling, and so on. And if you were to enlarge this, you would have a lot of problems getting it into Illustrator and fixing up all these little small things when you try to draw it. Okay, so because if you make it large, it makes your life easier. And so what you're going to do then is you're going to essentially trace the outline in Illustrator. And so what we do here is we go to Illustrator and we make a new document, file new, and we say it's going to be 600 by 600, right? And we say okay to that, and we create it, right? So now we get a new document, and you want to make sure you're at 100% or larger, but 100% is usually ideal. And we go file place, right? So we go to file place. So this is how you import graphics into Illustrator. You don't import them, you place them. So you hit place, and then you go to wherever it happens to be. I've hidden mine on the desktop here. And so let's see, where is it here? I gotta go find it. Is this it? Okay, let's use this one for starters. Or maybe it's this one. Yeah, let's use this one because this one has serifs and straights and so on. The other one is a little bit more curvilinear, so it gives me a chance to kind of talk about some of the things that are important. So I'm going to grab this. You'll notice that it says link. If you uncheck that, it will embed the file. If you leave this, it will only link the file. So I'm going to import it. And we can even say show import options here. And then we can go to options here. But essentially, we're just going to grab this and we're going to place it. Okay, so, and now I get a little, indicator, and I click and it's like, whoa, it's really big. So we can then transform this graphic, and we can see that it's really, really big. So we can scale it down. And what I'm doing here is I'm simply scrolling over the number. And I've also got the proportion linked, which is default. And so that way, when I scale this down, it will, it'll just scale it. Now I could probably, just add a number in here, but sometimes you just don't know. So I'm going to just scale that till it's about the right size, and then I'm going to move it into the proper position. So now I've got my drawing in place, and I'm going to just kind of do that. Where it is in the layering doesn't really matter. I mean, in terms of how it's on the artboard, because we're going to turn that off anyways. So now what we have here is a layer. Well, we haven't really talked about layers much in here. And so layers are essentially like making a sandwich. You put a piece of bread down, you put some meat down, put some lettuce, some tomato, mustard underneath, or maybe you squirt ketchup on it, and then you put the top layer of the bread. So layers are the same way. And so essentially what we do here is if we flip this down, we'll see that the image is in layer 1. These are what's known as sublayers, and they'll become important later. But for the time being, we'll just flip that open, and we will click here, and we will make a new layer. Okay, so when we make a new layer, that layer is now going to be where we're going to draw, and the layer with the image, we're going to lock it. Okay, never mind. It wants me to do layer options. I'll just call this layer 2. This is layer options right here. Show, print, preview, and so on. Those are the defaults. Those are all good. You can name it or not. In our case here, it's not going to matter that much. I'm going to just say okay to that. Move back up to my layers, and I'm going to lock the image layer down so that I don't mess it up. It's locked, can't touch it, can't move it, can't do anything. And all our drawing is going to happen now on layer 2. Okay, so now we move over to our tools, and we see the pen tool. Now, people are very intimidated by the pen tool because it's kind of tricky. But once you get used to it, it's not bad. And I'm going to show you some tricks on how to use it. You'll also notice if we click on it and hold that there's a pen, there's add anchor points, delete anchor points, and an anchor point tool, which allows us to pull out handles. We'll cover all these in a moment. Okay, so for time being, what we're going to do is we're going to draw our outline. So there's a lot of little details in these kinds of drawings. You'll notice that there's a curve at the top, and these are the things you'd miss if you had your drawing small, because you wouldn't have worked out this little detail here. So where do you start? I usually like to start at a corner and then move forward. Now, the important thing to understand about the pen tool, you get a little rubber band, and when you are drawing curved lines versus straight lines, you will have essentially, you have to create a vertice or a point right at the center of the curve. You click and then you drag, okay? Now, you'll see I have a little bit of a rubber banded curve. And then if I click again, and I'm going to click here where the direction changes, and I pull out in the direction that I want the curve to go. Now I'm at the top here, and there's going to be a lot of little things that we're going to fix. That's what these little handles right here are for. So I'm going to click again in curve, and then I'm going to click again, okay? So now what's happening is I've got some little bumps and stuff, but that's okay. What we're trying to do is we're trying to create the number of points that we need to create the smooth shapes. Holding the shift key down will constrain the vertical line. If you click and don't drag, you get a point rather than a curve. So that's a very sharp angle right in there. So I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to assume he's got a little curve in here, which would be a bracket on the serif. Okay. Now at the moment I got a fill, so I'm going to turn that fill off, and I'm going to turn the line on, and I'm going to make the line black. See how I did that? Clicked on that little black thing there, and that came off. Okay, now I got a black line. Okay, perfect. So here, if you zoom in using the Command Plus tool, you can go in and you can do some nice little tight little lines. Now I know that this is looking a little intimidating, but don't worry about it. Okay, again, I'm going to hit the shift key to keep that line straight. Now I got a little curve right in here and then another curve here. So remember, what you want to do is that whenever the curve changes direction, that's where you put a vertice. Okay, it changes direction again. Here it's going to change direction again. So ideally, the fewer the fewer points you put in, the better in general. Okay. You can also use the space bar to move your drawing around the canvas. Okay, so here this is a tricky situation right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click once to kind of finish up that curve and also give me a point that will allow me to run a straight line. Again, I'm going to hold the shift key down to make it vertical. And then we have a bracket right in here, right? And so I'm going to hold that right there. Now the bracket has a curve, right? So I'm going to draw that out. And then this also has a curve. So I'm going to draw that out. There's a little curve around the serif. So I'm going to click and draw that out. Now this is still a little loopy, right? Don't worry about it. We're going to fix that. So the curve around here, right at the apex of the curve, I'm going to draw another one. At the apex of the curve, I'm going to draw another one. Here we have a sharp point. We can fix this arc with this handle. I'll cover that in a minute. So I'm going to make a sharp point there, no drag. Have another curve direction, change in direction right there. Space bar to scoot me along there. And then here looks like another straight line. So I'm going to draw this up like that. And then a straight line, right? So I'm going to click. And then I'm going to click again, holding the shift key down to make sure that's vertical. And probably right about there. Now I've got a bracket, right? So I'm going to kind of draw that out. Now, I'm not exactly familiar with this particular, I don't know what typeface he's using, so I don't know exactly how the serifs look. So here I'm going to assume that the serifs are going to be straight. So I click and don't drag. Click and don't drag. Shift key to hold the horizontal. Click and don't drag. Click and don't drag. Now I have another bracket right here. So here's the change in direction right there. Click and drag in the direction you want it to go. Click when you want the straight angle and drag out one more time. Space bar to help me come out, and probably zoom out, Command minus to zoom out a little bit. Scoot this over so I can see it. Hold the shift key down for another vertical. And I mean, this is fine that it doesn't follow the perimeter, because that's why we're using this tool at this time. Okay, so now I'm going to be at the bottom of the bracket. So I click once. Now at the bottom of the bracket, I click right in the center of that. That will allow this curve to be correct. I click once more, and then I click once to finish it off. Okay, so now if I use my pointer tool and just let that go, we can see that I've created a outline. Okay, so if we were to fill this, let me zoom out here for a moment. Okay, if we click the fill for a moment, we can then fill it with black. Say okay, and I didn't have it selected, sorry. We have to select the object, double click on the color, fill it with black, say okay, and now we have a black shape. Now, obviously, we have a problem with the holes, right? So let's go in and fix that. So I'm going to undo that, and we're going to create the holes, the counters. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in on this. All right, so I can see the hole counter, which is good. I'm going to use my pen tool again, and I've got a couple of curves and a couple of straights. So I'm going to start at the corner. Sometimes that's the better option. Hold that. We don't have to hold anything. Click. Here's the center of the arc. Click and drag. The arc changes direction. Click and drag. Straight angle. Not sure if that's going to be vertical or not. We can probably fix that later. This is a corner. Click. Don't drag. This is probably a nice long curve right in here. So I'm going to click once and pull out till that angle, till that curve is good. This is another straight. Actually, it's not going to be straight, but I can fix it with this little handle right there. So I'm going to just click once, and then I'm going to finish. Okay. And then I'm going to scroll, use my hand tool, and that's the space bar. Here I have a bunch of curves, but I have one angle. So I'm going to start where the angle is. So I'm going to click here, not drag. This is an easy curve, click and drag. I would say that this ought to be a curve in here because the sharp angle on there is going to look weird and it's not going to look like it's flowing, right? So I'm going to click right in here and I'm going to put an arc in there. This is going to be a full arc all the way around. So I'm going to click another arc here. And then I'm going to click another arc. Notice I'm only clicking where the angle changes direction, right? And then I'm going to finish off this by holding the shift key down and see where that goes. So the shift key is going to give me an extra point, which is fine. I'll delete the extra point if I need to. And then I'm going to come in and finish off the shape. Okay. So now I basically got 3 shapes, right? And these don't have fills. So let me zoom out so we can see the whole thing. So now I'm going to just select everything. And what is going to happen here is that I'm going to have the, I got to cut these shapes out. Okay. So here's where the Pathfinder tool comes in. If it's not open, and you will find that Pathfinder tool in the window and you will find Pathfinder. Okay. And so now my Pathfinder just shows up over here. And I want to use the donut tool, the exclude. Okay, I want to make holes, right? So I need to select everything, which I just did, but you can only select 2 things at a time. So I'm going to select all and I'm going to fill everything. And I'm going to just fill them. It doesn't matter what color you fill it with. Okay. But I can only Pathfinder 2 shapes at a time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one, and the other shape that is going to cut the hole has to be on top, which it is because we created it second. If we flip our little layer down over here, we'll see that here's my main path, there's my 2 counter paths, okay, and they're on top of the path. That's what you want, okay? So never draw the counters first, always draw the shape first. Okay, so I'm going to select that. I'm going to shift click the second hole. And then I'm going to hit the Pathfinder tool. Bingo, now I got a hole, right? That Pathfinder tool does that. I'll do the same thing here then. I'll select the object here, and then I'll shift click this, and I'll click the Pathfinder tool. Bam, now I have my 2 counters. Okay, so now if I select the object and I turn off the fill, I just have the objects now, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to clean up all of our little issues. So at this point, we could probably turn off the background. So you do that by clicking on the little eyeball, and it turns it off. And now we're only left with the outline. So what we'll do now is we are going to go in and we're going to just make this look good, right? So if we want to fill it, we can. Sometimes it might be better if the shape is filled. And again, it doesn't matter what color the fill is. I'm going to actually make it kind of a nice, I didn't have it selected. You always got to select it. Okay. So now I'm going to go in and I'm going to use my direct selection tool. This tool allows me to select vertices in the handles. So I'm going to click on that. And now you'll see I've got a lot of cool little tools in here that I can play with. Primarily, we're not going to necessarily worry about these little shapes because these will pull in. Actually, it won't. It won't because it's a counter. So what we want to do is we want to look at our line. So let's take a look at these first, right? So this is an A. And we're going to want to adjust that so that the vertical is the same. So this looks like this is close to the right. So I'm going to, come on, you can do it. Okay. What I just did here was, if you just click the whole thing, all the vertices are selected. You don't want that. You only want one vertice. So you can see that when I roll over, I'll get the vertice, right? So what I want to do is I want to grab this vertice here, and I want to pull it over a little bit. And then I want to grab this vertice, and I want to pull that over a little bit. And again, if I hold the shift key down, it'll constrain it to the vertical. Okay? So now I've got this pretty close to what it should be. Now I need to fix the curves. Now you can see I did a pretty good job fixing the curves, but I got a little bump here, and the serif looks a little weird over here. And so basically, I'm actually zoomed in here, so let me zoom out over here. I have a zoom on my keyboard, and so sometimes I forget that that's zoomed in. So let me zoom in using the zoom tool. And so hand tool, scoot that over. Here, you can even move things with the arrow keys. See what I'm doing here? Okay, that clean that up nice. Sometimes you got to be zoomed out a little bit in order to see inaccuracies, because sometimes everything is looking like you are in a relationship. Okay. All right, so let's see. In this case here, I'd probably move this up a little bit. Here, I'd probably pull, see, watch how these handles work. If you grab the handle, you can do weird things to the shape, right? And so you can also clean the shape up. Like, say, for example, I wanted that arc to be smoother. I could pull that up. And then, for example, here, that's a point. It has no arc on it. Actually, it does. Okay, and so now I just kind of cleaned up that arc a little bit. Might still need a little bit of adjustment right there. And that looks pretty good. Here I got a little bump right there. So I'm going to find that little vertice right there, and notice that it has two handles, right? So you click and the handles kind of work together. So here I kind of want to just smooth that line out a little bit so that the curve is nice and smooth. Then I'm going to zoom up here, and here I've got a couple of bumps, right? And this is typical. You don't freak out. And so what I want to do here is, let's see, just kind of looking at what I have already. And it might be where I might want to pull this handle up a little bit. Okay. And that'll fix both of those bumps actually in Magic, right? Click off of it to see what's going on. I got a little bump here, so I want to fix that. So probably grab this handle right here and pull that up a little bit. See how that looks in here. This line is now causing trouble. So I pull that up a little bit. So you can see this is where the art comes into this particular tool. In this case here, I might have to move that out a little bit because the handles aren't going to do the job of smoothing that out. At this point, you can also use the Command H, and that will hide the outline. And so if you're just trying to quickly see what's happening, rather than deselecting it, you could hit Command H and then turn it back on, and then you can see what's going on. So Command H will turn off the outline, Command H will turn it back on again. And this will help us to quickly clean up these arcs. Okay, so this is all looking pretty good. A little bump right here, I want to fix that. I just kind of pull that handle down a little bit. Okay, and that fixed that little bump up pretty nice. Okay, so then I'm going to scoot on over, and I know I got some issues with the serif up here, remember that. So here, the handles were too far along, so maybe I need to scoot this one down a little bit. And maybe just grab, you got to be careful with these handles. Grab that handle and just sort of pull that down a little bit. Notice how that evens up that little serif a little bit more so that it's a nice smooth line. This handle is too long, So I got to pull that in a little bit. Might even need to move that point up a little bit, possibly pull it down. See, what's happening here is that this handle and this handle are too close together. So what happens is that they start to interact and start to do weird things. So try to have a little space between your handles. This still has a, see, this one's a little too long, right? So I'll kind of pull that in a little bit, and that eases up that curve a little bit. Notice the curves around the outside of the serif look nice. This angle here probably needs a little help to keep that transition. See how that kind of now eases up into there a little bit, right? And so then cruise on down with your hand key, right? Whoa, jumped over a little bit. Okay, that's all looking good. So now I got to resolve these issues with the serifs. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit and use my hand tool to kind of center that up a little bit in my artboard. And now you'll see that this is not right, right? If I click on, let me zoom out here, I'm zoomed in. If I click on that shape, notice that the serifs don't line up. So here I'd probably want to bring the serif in a little bit. Notice it's a little too short there. And we can also see now that we're zoomed out that there's some thickness issues, and also, you know, it's not that smooth right through here either. And this arc here is a little harsh. This is too low based on the baseline. So what we need to do is fix all that stuff up, right? So the easiest thing to do if you want to just move a bunch of vertices is just make a marquee. It'll grab the vertices, and then you can just scoot them in using your arrow key until it's about right. Okay. And then here, same kind of thing. I have to zoom in a little bit. So I'm going to zoom in a little teeny bit here, scoot that over. And then I got to get all these baselines right. So any point that's down in here, I'm going to take that and I'm going to move them up until it hits the baseline. And this one here, got to grab that and move that up so that it hits the baseline. And then here, whoop, got to be careful about that. Gonna have to zoom in and grab these separately. Hold the shift key down, grab both, and then we move them up like so. Okay, we still have issues now with the curve, so now I've got to clean that up a little bit. Sometimes you just got to pull the whole vertice up and then pull the handle and kind of ease the curve. Okay, and then that's not looking too bad, but still too low. What we can do here is we can add some guides. So if we go Command R, notice that we now have rulers. And the rulers are kind of handy because you can just pull a guide and then pull it down to your baseline. And that guide just hangs out there. It can move, you can grab it, you can move it. Sometimes it's locked by default, like I think in here, if we go to View and we say Guides and Unlock Guides. See, so the guide at the moment is locked by default. So if we click that, we can then grab the guide and move it around, okay? So all I would do here, I'd lock the guide here really quick, just so I won't move it. And then I'm going to use my direct selection tool right there. And then I'm gonna grab the vertices here, and I'm gonna just scoot them up until they hit the baseline. Perfect. So now I got that. I don't need the guide anymore. Go to View, go to Hide Guide, go to Guides, unlock the guide, and then I can just click and just drag it off. Okay, so now everything's looking copacetic. Now I'm looking at the stroke, right? The stroke has, it's too thick right in here. So now what I would do here is I'd grab this vertex. Let me just zoom in on that really quick here because I need to see what's going on. Okay, so let's see, even sometimes even bigger yet. Okay, so I got a point there and I got a point here. So I'm gonna have to grab both that point and this point. And I'm gonna zoom out a little bit here. And then I can see both of these. So I'm going to hold the shift key down, grab that point and grab this point. And I'm going to use my arrow keys. And I'm going to kind of move it in until the stroke kind of matches the weight. And that's a little too much. And that looks about right. Okay. Might even need to grab these two dudes right in here and scooch them over a little bit. Again, keeping this idea of the stroke. Okay, you don't want to distort that. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom out a little bit and see how that looks. Okay, now clearly I got an issue here. So you get the idea, right? And so I'm not going to keep belaboring the point. You can probably cut off your video at this point in the game. But that's how we get our design input into Illustrator. And then once you're done, you'll fill it with black, double click, fill it with black, say okay, and we're done. Okay, now we're not really done, right? You can see we've got a problem here, we've got a problem with the counter in here. The stroke may be still a little thick right in here, but we're getting close. And that's the process that we're going to go through. And like even up here, this looks a little bit weird now, right? That bump on that top of that serif looks a little too extreme. I'd want to fix that. The serif is still a little too far out. I'd want to fix that. I'd have to see after I move that in whether this needed to be moved out or not. Again, remember that our proportions are going to be now correct to the design, not correct to the individual letters. Okay, so now we're trying to make the design work as well as possible. All right, so that's the process. Takes some practice, but as you can see, it's not that hard. And the main things to remember is when you're drawing your lines, don't put in too many points. Only put in points at the apex of a turn. Don't put any points extra in there, only at the apex. So if we look at this here and we use our direct selection tool, just for review here, you'll see a point there, right? It's at the apex of the turn, and that could even be moved a little bit maybe, but it's doing a good job where it's at. Those handles are super powerful. You know, turn the points at the apex, the points at the apex, the points at the apex. Don't click and drag when you have an angle. I wanted smooth lines in here because I wanted that arc to be a little bit, I didn't want these to be harsh lines. But up here, like for example here, let's take a look at this really close. Let me zoom back out here and actually zoom in with the zoomer tool. And let's take a look at what we have here. We have 2 points. And in actuality, I like the way that looks. I like that nice little curve in there. So I'm not going to change that. I'm going to leave that alone because I think it looks cool. And this one here, even, maybe it would have been good if we had a little bit of an arc in here. So let's go look at that. And so let's zoom in on that. And let's take a look at this. Here I do have a handle. So I could even change that. Now, before I muck that up, I might grab this handle and I might do that instead. But notice that that's going to change this. So what I can do is if I want to have this angle changed but not affect the line, I can use the this pointer tool on the pen tool. So if I'm on the pen tool and I click, here's the anchor point tool. And what this allows me to do is I can only move one of the arcs without mucking up the other one. So now I have a nice smooth little transition in there. And again, these tools take some time to practice with, but if you need to add a point, you click and you just say add anchor point, and then you just click anywhere on the line and it will add an anchor point. I'm going to undo that because I don't want that one there. And by the same token, I can, if I got too many, I can use the delete anchor tool and I can go to a point and I can click on that and it goes away. I'm going to undo that because I want that point, but you get the idea. You get the point. All right, so that's how our little story works, okay? And that's our project. And Command 0 gives you fill the frame. Command 1 gives you 100%. There's a couple of quick little tools for zooming in and out. All right, so that's the story. That's how you'd make this work. And so have some fun.